everybody, it's Kyla at the MJC, and I am back to walk you guys through Section C of the summons and petition with minor children. So the part 1, starting the divorce with minor children. Before we get going, as always, I just want to remind you that nothing in these videos is intended to be legal advice. It's a video, so I'm not able to analyze your situation to determine whether a divorce is the right thing for you, whether you're likely to get what you're asking for in your divorce, or whether the timing is right on the divorce. So if you have any questions like that, I would recommend getting some legal advice. You can get brief legal advice for free here in Milwaukee County through the Marquette Volunteer Legal Clinics. If you're not in Milwaukee County, then you can contact your clerk of court to find out what resources are available in your area. All right, so getting back into this here, Section C is where you're going to provide all of the information about this current marriage and any previous marriages that you've had. So the first one is where you're going to put the date that you were married, and you want to put, if possible, month, day, year. So September 1st of 1999. You want to put that there. Some people will say, well, I don't know the exact day. That gets a little tricky. In an ideal world, you want to have the exact date. And so some ways you might be able to find that. As you could see if you have any, old photos that are date stamped. See if you have a friend or a family member who remembers. Maybe you have an old calendar that might have that still as a reminder in it. If you really can't find it, you can try entering, say, just the month and year. So maybe I put September of 1999. That is not ideal, and for the second part, the additional paperwork that you have to do to get your court date in front of a judge, most people really will need the exact day that they got married. You can also see, if none of those other options worked, you could also check and see if maybe if you can get a copy of your marriage license or your marriage certificate from your local registrar of deeds. All right, so you put in the date you were married. You're also going to put the city and state where you were married. So Milwaukee, Wisconsin. If you weren't married in the United States, or if you were married somewhere where, if you weren't married in the United States under the state section, you're just going to put the country where you were married. So if, let's say, John and Jane were married in Toronto, we would still put the city, Toronto, but then under state, we would put Canada. So there, we've got that. If you were married somewhere in a different country and maybe there aren't, you weren't married in a city, or the place where you were married doesn't have that specific a designation, then you can just put the country where you were married. But if there was a city or a town or a village or something of that ilk, we would put the name of that location here. Here, you're just going to indicate whether you are filing for divorce. So again, divorce is saying that your marriage is irretrievably broken, and at the end of it, you will no longer be married to your spouse, and all of your stuff will be split up. Or if you're filing for a legal separation. At the end of a legal separation, you are still married to your spouse. So at a divorce, you are no longer married to that person. At the end of a legal separation, you are still married. You've split up your stuff, and you, in most cases, can't make marital property anymore, but you're still married to them. And as you can see here, a legal separation is saying that your marriage is broken, but not to the point where you're ready to get divorced yet. So if you're getting divorced, you just check A. If you're requesting a legal separation, you'll check B, but you also need to put some reason about why you're requesting a legal separation and not a divorce. You can certainly get legal advice about what to put there, but as far as filling out the form, we recommend just putting your reasoning. So if your reasoning is, my religion says I can't get divorced, then put that there. If your reasoning, whatever your reasoning is, your reasoning is, I think we should go to counseling, or I'm not certain that I want to be divorced, or whatever that might be, that's what we would have you put in that line. So, there's a possibility of reconciliation. That's some fancy lawyer language for we might get back together. Yep, so we'll put that in. Just one thing to note is if you're uncertain, it might be worth getting some advice about whether doing a divorce or a separation, because while there are ways to change which one you picked in the future, that's harder and that adds more difficulty. So it's not impossible if you are watching this video and you already filed this and you want to change, it's possible. But it's going to be much easier if you pick the right category right off the bat. All right, and so then we have previous actions. Previous actions is asking, and I always ask this backwards and confuse everyone. So it wants to know if this is the first time that you and your spouse have ever tried to get divorced from each other. So if it is the first time that you've ever tried to get divorced, you'll put yes. If you've ever filed for divorce previously, even if that divorce case wasn't successful, you're going to check no, and then you're going to provide the information about that previous filing. So if you previously filed here in Milwaukee, and that's obviously Wisconsin, and just like before, if you filed in a different country, you would put the equivalent of a county if they have it. So in my Toronto example, we might put Ontario here, and then the country, and then a case number. So here. So you'll want to provide that information. If you're not certain about your case number, this is one of those sections where you're supposed to provide this information, and so ideally you should try and find that information. Here in Wisconsin, you can find it on CCAP, that's CCAP, which is our public access to court records if you were divorced or you had tried to get divorced in a Wisconsin county. If you got divorced in another state or you tried to get divorced in another state, you might want to check and see if they have an online record system. But if you can't find it, if you don't have it, you can try leaving it blank. Many clerks will accept it blank, but obviously the more information that is missing from this form, the more likely you are to have problems down the line. So I really recommend trying as hard as possible to get that case number and that information about your dismissed case. And then on this last line, you're going to indicate whether or not that case has been dismissed. So that means, has the court formally ended that case? And if you're starting a brand new case, the answer is almost always going to be yes. For a very small percent of people, what might have happened is you weren't able to get your first divorce served in the 90 days that is required, or you weren't able to get that date extended. If you're in that situation, you might be in a situation where your case has not been dismissed, but you are starting over. In that case, you would check no, but do make sure you're going to want to handwrite, because there's no place to just write this in, a little explanation. So no, because I wasn't able to get my spouse served within 90 days, so that whoever you're filing with knows why you're starting over. And again, if you're starting over, it may be worth getting some legal advice to talk through what your options are to make sure that this case is more successful. But here we're just going to say that John and Jane's case was previously dismissed. And last but not least, in this section, you're going to want to put any information about previous marriages. So if this is your first marriage, you'll just check yes here on number 5, and that's all you have to do. You get to skip A through H. But if it's not your first marriage, you're going to put no, and you'll put the name of the person that you were married to previously. So let's say, and John is our petitioner, so let's say before he was married to Jane Doe, he was married to Jane Smith. So I guess John really likes women named Jane, or he likes divorcing them anyway. And then you'll indicate whether your marriage ended through divorce or if your previous spouse died. So divorce here. If it's death, you'll check there. If your spouse died, you would still fill C in, but you don't need to do D. If you got divorced, you'll fill in both of these. So C is where you're going to put either the date of divorce or the date that your spouse passed away. So we'll say 1998 because he married Jane in 1999. So that was, for John, this would be the date he got divorced. And again, if your spouse passed away, the date they passed away. Here, the place where the divorce was granted. So if you were in Milwaukee, it would just be Milwaukee County. The name of the court. So usually the name of the court is going to be the court, the county where the court was located. But again, if you have documents from that divorce, it'll usually say up at the top. So like ours say Milwaukee County Circuit Court. It, when you're dealing with another state, it probably says that as well. But I'm just going to put Milwaukee County partly because of the spacing here. And you'll put the city and state where that is located. If you're not able to find the name of the court, you at least want to put in the city and state. And again, if you're not sure about this, we really, really recommend trying to find that information. If you just can't find it, you can leave those sections blank or put as much as you know. So again, divorce might be, maybe you're putting January of 98. But the more information that's missing, the more likely you may have a problem down the line. So our recommendation is to find that information using either public CCAP or going to the record center for the county where you were divorced and getting a copy of your divorce decree or getting a divorce certificate or something like that. All right, and then there's also another section that's exactly the same if you had multiple previous marriages. So if you had a second previous marriage, maybe John was also married to, Jane Johnson, then we could list that here as well. If you were married to more than 2 people previously, you'll just attach a document, like a Word doc, where you'll fill in the same information for all of your previous marriages. 6 wants to know whether this is your spouse's first marriage. So John is filling this form out, as you may recall. This section wants to know if this is Jane's first marriage. So if it's yes, again, you just check yes. If it's no, you'll put no, and you're going to put as much information as you know about your spouse's previous marriage. Hopefully you know it all. That would be ideal. If you don't, and you don't have a way to obtain that information, then you're just going to put as much as you know. So maybe we know that Jane was previously married to John, we'll say John Doe. And, we know he died, and we know he died in 1997, but we're not sure of all the details. Or, if they got divorced, you're going to put just as much as you know. If you really don't know something, so let's say in this situation, John Smith, our petitioner, knows that Jane Doe was previously married to John Doe, but he doesn't know and can't find out the court where they got divorced, then you're just going to go ahead and put unknown. So you want to do that as little as possible, but since this is somebody else's information, it is possible you won't be able to obtain that information. But again, fill in as much as you can, and if possible, put in the work to try and find it if it's obtainable information. So I'm just going to go back here just to finish this form up. All right, so that is all for Section C. I will be back shortly to walk you through Section D and finish off this petition. But for now, thank you all for listening. I hope that this was helpful. If you still have questions or need additional information, you can always stop by our courthouse location. We're located in room G9 of the Milwaukee County Courthouse. But yeah, that is all for now. Thank you all so much for listening, and I hope that you all go out and represent yourselves well.